Point number 4 in the Bloomberg story on the Koch brothers and their illegal actions. Uncontrolled emissions of benzene. Now, this is a dandy. So Sally Barnes-Solis was hired as an investigator to find out, hey, how are we doing in terms of the emissions that we are putting into there? Because, look, they've got to comply with government standards on this, because if you don't, people get sick. Benzene is an absolutely proven cause of cancer. Okay, there's absolutely no question about that. And it turns out that she did find out that they had issues with benzene emissions. She said, first of all, the refinery was just hemorrhaging benzene into the atmosphere. Hemorrhaging benzene is not a good idea. She winds up telling the regulators, because when she told her bosses and said, hey, we have to report this, they said, yeah, I don't think so. I think we're going to report something else. In fact, let me tell you what the reality was and what they reported. They could only do 6 metric tons of uncontrolled benzene emissions. So it's not like you can't do any emissions. Regulators are reasonable. They understand you're going to have a certain amount. They're just trying to figure out what the safe amount is. So they've decided that 6 metric tons of benzene, which is, again, scientists have determined is a decent amount, but not one that will cause cancer to everyone in the area, whether it's workers or the citizens. Well, guess how much the Koch brothers companies did? Turns out they had 91 metric tons of uncontrolled benzene emissions, which was 15 times higher than what the rules allowed for. So now this is a significant problem. So what did they report to the government instead? They said it was 0.61 metric tons, which was in reality about 1/149th of the amount of emissions they were actually emitting into the air. So a gigantic amount of benzene is put into the air when they shouldn't. How do we know benzene causes cancer? Well, because there's been numerous studies that showed, for example, in these kind of emissions cases, people working around those emissions wound up getting cancer within 5 years at a significant rate. Okay, now it's not just the workers, it's also the nearby areas. In fact, Solis talks about how she got into the business because she wanted to make sure that everybody was safe. She wanted to make sure, she was proud of what she did. That's one of her quotes, where she explains, look, I didn't want people working in those factories to get sick. I wanted to protect the community. And that's part of the reason she also reported it to the higher ups at Koch Industries. And here's what their reaction was, according to her. She says, quote, they didn't know what to do with me. They were really kind of baffled that I had ethics. In 2001, Koch refinery unit responsible for those benzene emissions pled guilty to federal felony charges of lying to regulators and paid $20 million in fines and penalties. So again, this is not disputed. It is absolutely proven. Now, here's the important part. I think the benzene story is amazing because of what it shows. It turns out that they could have actually controlled the benzene emissions and been within the law and not harmed anybody if they spent $7 million. Now, eventually they get fined $20 million, but they think that's worth it because of all the years that they are putting that emissions into the air, which they didn't have to pay for. Plus, they figure we got caught on this, but we don't get caught on all the other things we cheat on. Overall, it makes economic sense for us to continue doing this. But a lot of times, conservatives or Republicans will say, oh no, but wait a minute, that's not fair. This overburdensome regulations, and you're going to put these companies out of work, and the next thing you know, there's not going to be any jobs. Well, is that true? Well, not exactly. It turns out that Koch earned $176 million in profits from that Corpus Christi plant in 1995 alone. So all they had to do was earn $169 million in profit from that plant, and everybody would have been safe. But just to squeeze an extra nickel out of it, even though it cost the economy and it cost the workers there and the citizens of Corpus Christi more money, they didn't care. They did it anyway. Again, all proven, they pled guilty. They do this all the time. So they would have made just a tiny little less profit and kept their workers safe and the area safe, and they didn't want to do it. Their workers get, cancer? Who cares, man? Charles and David Koch saved a couple of bucks. Isn't that awesome?